to CMOs Off Script, where the conversations are as bold as our coffee and the insights as sharp as our wit. We're your hosts, Amanda, Bethany, Julia, Laura, and Nisha, 5 women with diverse perspectives on navigating the intricate world of healthcare marketing. Had enough of the same old marketing babble? Us too. We'll dive into one topic each week and serve up our unfiltered advice. Get ready for a fresh take on marketing. Welcome to CMOs Off Script.
Pop quiz. How many years of experience do you think the group of women on this call actually have?
Oh gosh.
Total average?
Total.
1 million years of experience.
At least over 100 for sure.
And the question is, what kind of experience?
Here for the math. The life experience?
Life.
Wow.
I mean, wow. Okay. Well, then we're giving up a lot more
1 million years of life experience.
Yeah.
Since we're all under 30, you know.
Right.
That's great. Healthcare marketing. Guess. Any guesses?
I'm going to go close to 100.
Yeah.
80?
I think we're probably around there.
Yeah.
So that was my did a little back of the envelope math. I practiced this with my daughter at the dinner table. We're at 93, so not bad. Pretty close to a hundo.
Pretty good guess.
Yeah.
Good guess. Yeah.
Nice.
I love it.
I love
Okay,
that we've never talked about that before, by the way.
Right.
We have no idea who each other are.
I mean,
I read your bio.
I read your bio. Turns out I didn't need the numbers to see the amazingness that is on this screen. So let's dive in. So today we're having this conversation about metrics that matter. I think all of us have had plenty of conversations with the C-suite, with investors, with board members about the critical few. We've also had conversations that span the spectrum on everything from how many website clicks to Twitter followers you've had and everything in between. So let's have a conversation and really dig into, the things that we think really matter. And I think at the same time, we can also tackle, how do we get there? Let's talk about some of the things like infrastructure, other things that you should be looking at, leading and lagging indicators. Maybe we can fit in AI in the conversation. But why don't we just dive right into a conversation on, what are the critical few that you are really looking at in your organizations? What are the things that you really care about? Bethany, you're next to me on the screen, so I'm handing the baton to you, if you don't mind.
Thanks for the warning. No, I think we all at one point or another, and most of us today have worked with startup organizations. And so I work with a lot of startups. I've been CMO of startups, pre-IPO businesses. The key metric is, ARR, if you're in health tech, that's a big one. And then I'm looking at MQLs on the leading side, SQOs, so sales qualified opportunities are a big one. But ultimately, I think it comes down to the type of organization you are, the type of business. Again, a lot of my career has been spent in the tech side of things, so health tech. And those were key metrics for us because I had a platform that I was marketing in many cases. And so those were the key things. There also is, in many of my organizations, we've looked at brand awareness metrics. And so we can talk about what that means because it's a little squishy sometimes, but I think the hard metrics really come down to ARR and growing that side of the business. And then, tracking SQOs in service of ARR. So that's kind of where I would start.
Great. Who wants to jump in next?
Yeah, I think that's right. One of the things we share, most of us or all of us, is that we've worked in growing organizations, right? And so you need to move along with the organization as they're growing. It begins with the end in mind, revenue. Are we going to make the number? Are we going to achieve our pipeline targets? Will we make the number in future quarters? And sometimes it surprises people that marketing cares about those, because in the prior seat, there might've been someone who didn't care as much about that. And so you may be inheriting a team where you are expanding on what the definition of marketing means. So beginning with the end in mind has always served me in my roles from Series A to E. In particular, I love when Bethany, you said that you talk about, sales qualified opportunities. It's not enough to, introduce, expose someone to your offering. You've got to ensure that it becomes a sales qualified, sales accepted opportunity. And that's really where the handshake and the sort of the spark happens. But there's so many other KPIs we look at well before that, right? There's all of the things from, visits to conversions to form fills that we care about. We don't need to expose all of those necessarily in the board meetings, in our leadership meetings, right? We want to know them, but you have to kind of match your audience in terms of where they are in their marketing acumen as well.
Great.
As a marketing agency serving this space, we have pressure on us to support that end result. There's everything is about tracking that end result that you're talking about, Julia. We really, over the course of, we've been in business for kind of a while now, and over the course of years, we're increasingly focused on reporting and delivering and tracking that ROI result, that lead gen, and to your point, not just creating a marketing lead. That's not enough. It has to be a qualified lead. It's next step. It's which, by the way, is teeing into my favorite topic, which is your infrastructure and making sure you're tracking. But anyway, I won't jump there quite yet. But yeah, I really think you have to today start with the end in mind. And I think the conundrum is to figure out how to track that brand piece, because that is so important to get that qualified lead. You need both, but the pressure is on to really deliver qualified leads, in my humble opinion.
So one of my favorite topics when it comes to metrics is about leading indicators. And I think it's mostly because a lot of the organizations I've worked with, I've had to build a demand gen and a product marketing program from scratch.
Yeah.
Right. And so by the time I get to building building an actual funnel, to recognizing revenue, to all of those metrics, I need to make sure that I'm heading in the right track. And so I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out what are those key leading indicators that are making me feel like, okay, this is working, this is not working. And then getting the teams to corral around that and react quickly. And some of those are as simple as because a lot of it, from a product marketing perspective, a lot of it has to do with messaging and positioning, and especially around the company. And so some of those things are as easy as putting together programs just to test messaging. And then the indicators are the conversion rates, right? Are these converting? Sometimes it's testing audiences. And then one of my favorite other things when we talk about MQL to SQL is disqualification rates based off of, are these why are these folks getting disqualified? I'm one of those really pragmatic folks that when I don't understand the reason why it's disqualified, I am trying as much as possible to get insight into, okay, was it pricing? Was it not the right time? Was it, anyway, so I think that's kind of those are the little things that I feel we just have to pay attention to, and we have to keep paying attention to. But to Julia's point, not necessarily something I'm starting a conversation with a CEO about, but just makes me feel like I can, when I'm telling the story of why things are working, I have these little proof points to know and to validate, which is always really nice.
But I also think that signals and requires a really clear and close alignment with the sales organization. If somebody's getting kicked out of the funnel, why, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I think that is such an important component in these kinds of conversations, is that sales and marketing alignment. And, that could be its own separate episode. But I think you've got to have that partnership to be able to get that kind of clarity. And we could jump off right now into that conversation, but maybe I'll hold back. But that was the first thing that came to my mind was you've got to have really strong alignment with sales to be able to make any of this other stuff work, right?
Can I clarify one thing before we go to the sales conversation? Because I'm like in violent agreement with that, and we got to touch on it. But Nisha, when you say someone's getting kicked out of the process or the pipeline, are you throwing them in nurture? Because that's my assumption, but like maybe you're not. Maybe you're saying like, are you talking about like after an SDR or sales has gotten a hold of that lead and then says, no, it's not the right lead? Or are you saying we've disqualified it based on our SLAs or our, like criteria to track the funnel from MQL to SQO? And like in my world, those would be thrown into a nurture cycle and you'd come back when they were maybe hitting some of those scores that you're looking for.
Right.
So,
but I like to track why, right? So they're getting put in a nurture, but is it because it's not the right time? Is it because they're using a competitor? Is it because they just generally don't see the value? It's a pricing issue, whatever it is, right? I genuinely feel like in order for me to do my job better during that nurture phase, I just want to know why are they getting kicked into nurture? Well, and then there's the total disqualification of like they're not in nurture because it's just a bad contact and like not the right fit at all.
Got it.
But yeah, that's where the alignment on making sure that you have that further understanding, because oftentimes and we can start to talk about like pipeline velocity and all that stuff at a later date, but like oftentimes like I'm just trying to figure out the quality issue, because I hate when there's a number for the quantity for like the MQLs, and I hate just reporting on the number, mostly because it feels like I'm just chasing like a number, and I want to chase essentially like the quality aspect, right? Is it
for sure?
What's the
Is it a product fit issue? Are we targeting the wrong? Like I'm thinking like you're targeting the wrong audience with the messaging, or somehow it's not the right fit for that audience, and that's why they're getting kicked out. Like understanding where is marketing responsible versus something
like,
else.
It's almost like
is that a fair statement?
Why, right? Yeah. Why is it that 50% of these folks are feeling like it's a pricing issue, which I never think it, like, to me, the minute that it's pricing, I'm always like,
if it's a pricing issue, it's actually a value issue. We didn't tell the value in the right way. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I loved the disqualification question, the whether it's this lead does not match what we thought it would, and to please just explain why so we don't send you that lead type again, or this fell out of the pipeline and we believe it was because we had a competitor who told their story better, or some other reasons. But I love understanding that, because ideally you win more and you lose less. That's the goal, right? And so we have enough customers, enough revenue, enough of everything. We're going to need to understand that.
I think there's a note here too, is it's a reflection back. Do I need to tweak my marketing, or is there something happening on the sales side that needs focus? Because I think that's also part of this tracking project, is to really be able to fine tune where in the customer journey is the problem happening. So.
Do we want to dig into infrastructure right now then?
Let's do it. Yeah. I think I was going to lead there. So one of my favorite visuals is you can imagine dropping the dye in the water and seeing which way it flows. We want to know both ways. And so you look at every single stage, and that's only possible when you have a good data infrastructure. And, whether you're a Salesforce organization, there must be companies that are using Microsoft Dynamics. I haven't worked at one yet. Maybe I've steered away on purpose, but I'm very familiar with Salesforce. And so if it's a Salesforce CRM and it's a marketing automation platform, whether part out HubSpot, other, in a lot of startups, you're using HubSpot. I've found over the last, say, 12 years since I first began using HubSpot, it has really remarkably evolved in a way that I find is serving the need. I think there's a point at which the orchestration becomes very complex and we may exceed that. But for now, HubSpot, a great marketing automation tool, a great CRM tool, exposing or ensuring you're completely syncing, removing any sync errors, so you can see both mirror data in the system of record as appropriate. And then you can build a mini tech stack off of those two, but you need those two in my mind to have the starting point.
And we've worked with a lot of clients that have HubSpot for marketing automation and then have Salesforce for their CRM. And, that's a really successful combination too. We have a lot of clients that have used Pardot and Salesforce. It's not my favorite. Salesforce, double thumbs up. Pardot, I'm got to be honest, is a harder system for everyone, in my opinion.
And it takes forever to set up. But never mind. I've only been through that like a couple of times, and it's painful.
A lot of people really love Marketo. I think it's a pretty complex system, but it also really effective. Same Marketo, Salesforce is a great combination. But with any of these, it doesn't matter. I think, Julia, to your point, it's the connection. I think at the very front end, the conversation here is metrics that matter and being able to report accurately. At the very top level, you can't report, you can't depend on your metrics until you make sure that flow is working. And I think that was the one point I think we all agree we wanted to make sure we said in this call is like, make sure you've got it all set up from your pay-per-click generation, your social media, your email campaigns, your print campaigns, your conference attendance, your sales outreach, all of it flowing and connecting appropriately into your CRM. And then circling back and say one more thing, Amanda, your point about sales and marketing alignment is back to those definitions that Bethany started us with, making sure that your sales and marketing leadership and your C-suite all agree on what those definitions are.
Definitions.
Huge.
I was about to jump in and say that. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have the same definitions, like it's all for naught. I mean, it's like garbage in, garbage out. If you can't make sure that you're getting good quality data in and a consistent definition of what that data actually means, like the story that you're telling doesn't really mean anything, right? And you're,
Are we using ARR? Are we using ACV? Often going to your CFO and your sales partner and saying, what are the reports you're using? I would like to use the same reports because we pull the same data then. And I may add fields because I care about some related and adjacent things, sources, last conversions, dates that may not be germane for my finance partner, my sales partner. But if you start with the same base report, same fields, literally, this is the field I'm using. Is that the field you're using? You just start with a great place of clarity. And, not to mention, it will help ensure you are a credible partner talking about a different area of the business that is, adjacent and related. We're the precursor to pipeline as I see it. Marketing is here to help develop awareness, interest, consideration, intent, right? And so we can be the early signal, but it only begins if we're aligned on what, the data sources are, same fields, same data information.
Julia, I'm going to challenge what you just said. We're the precursor and we create velocity within the pipeline.
Oh, for sure.
Truth.
And I think
renewals and reduced churn and
Yes. And I want to add on to that too. It's what's interesting about what I've learned throughout my career is that it's not only alignment with sales, it's key alignment with your finance team. And oftentimes it's like that whole influence the influencer type play, where if you start with your finance team and you get them involved and educated into why you're looking at certain metrics and what you're seeing, and then they're working with sales as well, like it's kind of like a nice symbiotic relationship that now everybody's on the same page and everybody's sort of working together. I used to really advocate for always having finance at the table when we do pipeline calls, because it just makes my life so much easier when they understand why marketing tracks the way that they do, what kind of connections they're looking at, why, and then when you put in requests like for more investments in tech stack, or you need some sort of like operational help. I don't know. It just makes sometimes like it makes that part easier as well because they're like part of the decision from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Julia, you and I have worked with a really involved finance leader in the past, and he's always been so has such great insight into marketing and sales, and I totally echo that, Nisha. Really good experience.
Absolutely.
He was a really great example of having an engaged partner, I think.
That CFO was a gift for me as a marketer and you as a marketer, Laura, because we know we're talking about the same person.
I think I know this same person too, don't I, Laura?
And you know that person too? Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let him know to watch the first episode.
Exactly. I mean, he understood marketing, and part of that was because his MBA studies included marketing. In fact, I want to say he even had marketing maybe as an undergrad, and then went for his MBA, and then became a CFO on the CFO track. And so I did not have to explain that you invest to grow. That was so lovely. Yeah, and I think there were many other areas in which there was support for practical, data informed marketing programs, and I found it to be a delight. So, and I'm in a similar scenario now, a CFO who understands marketing. So I feel that might become my criteria as I'm looking at potential opportunities.
But
what is the fabric of the team?
Yeah, that's a great insight, and I think you're totally right.
It is a match to be made, right? There are great companies for great candidates, and you have to find the one that matches you. If you're looking right now, this might be a nugget you write down, because that's out there.
I 100% echo that. There's always, the relationship between sales and marketing or those leaders. But when I feel like the head of finance is vested and interested and asking me questions and setting up time, like little butterflies, like I feel like I'm like, yes, this is it. I found it.
I get it. I mean, I think y'all I'm going to take it back to sales for just a minute, because it's easy to say like, yes, these relationships should be amazing and we have to nurture them and maybe pick your next company. Like I joined a company without having the CFO or a head of finance in place at the time. So it's like, you don't always have that ability to like, I mean, hopefully you're part of the interview process if you're joining that early on that side of things. But there's a reason that sales and marketing aren't always aligned, right? And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And so it's easy to say like, oh, we should be one team and we should be looking at the same metrics. Like, I think that's right. But there's reasons that isn't happening. One of the reasons that I've run into is just, when you're at early stage and everybody's trying to do the things that are feeling most important to them. And sometimes for marketing, that's like, we got to build the brand or we got to build content, and like measurement comes second. And like, we don't even have a tech stack set up yet. Like sometimes it's so early, you're not even like there yet. So yeah, you want to build personas and you want to like build your SLAs and decision criteria across your tech stack and like what's a lead and what's, all the definitions, but like you aren't focused on that. Salespeople are out trying to like close deals and they're not as worried about some of these things in the beginning. So what I think is hard about that, making that relationship happen, is like seeing it in advance, saying like, we're taking a moment and people aren't focused on this, but then sometimes you got to like force, all right, it's time to talk about tech stack. We got to get, I recommend Salesforce. What are you guys using? Because sometimes they're not using Salesforce and you'd like them to, but they've picked another tech. And I see that a lot at early stage companies too. Salesforce is expensive. So sometimes early on, they're making choices based on budget and trying to see if this product is going to work in the market and like trying to save money because it's seed funding or like early stage. So it's bootstrapped, and, Salesforce and HubSpot as well are both on the more expensive side, even though they're targeting, startups to some degree. So it's tough to get that alignment sometimes, especially in those early days. Like I've joined companies where there was a sales function kind of in place and they realized like they didn't want to do the website anymore. So that's when they decided marketing was important, because like somebody needs to do the website and they don't want to do event logistics. And okay, so we better pull in a marketing leader. Like, and so then you're like, you know, inundated probably with too much to say, like, you know, so I think these are things that are easy to say, like, let's do it, but it's hard in reality.
I think often in my experience, the companies at the early stage, the sales leadership, it has to be a certain personality type that is, you know, really super driven and is able to get out there and work without a lot of marketing support, because often sales is there first, right? They bring marketing in because they no longer want to do their own event management, you know? So the personality type that's out there is really somebody who's a bit of a, this word is coming to mind, bear with me, maverick, sort of, you know. My older brother was always called a cowboy, you know. It's sort of like, you know, out there and cutting new territory. And it's a certain personality type that to get aligned with is not always easy. Like that's not a natural fit. That's not a natural state.
Really great point.
Yeah.
I came into a company that was a recently private equity acquired, 20-year-old company. And I was the second marketing hire ever. Like they just hired someone a year prior, totally sitting underneath sales. Like what you're describing, Laura, I'm like, to a T. Like marketing, we don't need that. We can like outsource, you know, sales leaders literally like writing, and the CEO are writing out the, you know, the slicks, like they got it. And I'm like, yep, they had it. So, you know, fundamentally created a very different idea of what the business looked like and was required once private equity investment came into play. But yeah, you know,
well, and I think that's where we can evangelize what marketing can be, because it is possible their last best experience wasn't that great. Right. Or they just don't have a lot of experience. Yeah. And so I come from I will tell you, full disclosure, I come from a place of empathy because my parents were 2 enterprise sales reps. My brother is one. Oh, wow. And so I appreciate the rigor. You know, a great win rate means you lose a lot of the time. Like if you're batting 300 in sales, that's pretty amazing, but you're losing 70% of the time. And so it is a different personality that will, be comfortable with that. So that's where I feel marketing and sales are the same coin, different sides. And we might disagree. But when we're on the playground and somebody's bullying our brother or sister, you better believe we're in there throwing punches. And I've had sales partners who haven't had much experience, especially startup, right? You might be their first marketing colleague that they've worked with. And they come to the table with you when they say, I'm struggling with awareness. I introduce what we are and people don't know our name. It's a credibility issue. So sometimes they can be your best partner in saying, this is why we need to invest in marketing, so that when I introduce, I am, ABC company, people say, oh, I've heard of you, and that is a real sales challenge when they're trying to introduce a new solution and no one knows who they are. And so it can be website. It can be, getting out with an event strategy. It also can be, the other part of it, which is awareness. And it's one of the harder things to measure. But I know in a past conversation, we started talking about brand measurement. We can talk about, lacking a comprehensive brand study, a research study, which I think, we recognize is not typically in the budget for growing companies. There's ways you can back into a proxy for brand awareness. And Bethany, I think you have, some thoughts around how you might start to measure brand awareness lacking studies. There's ways we could get there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Right. I've done it both ways. The very expensive, like, let's get, research out there and understand what our current brand equity is in the market and awareness. And those are expensive. They can be 6-figure projects, hundreds of thousands of dollars to understand your current state of brand equity or brand awareness. And sometimes that's a worthwhile way to go. But there are a ton of other options where you can establish proxies. And when I've done it in the past, I've looked at things like PR or media mentions. So just like a proxy for awareness of how much you're being talked about in the media, social listening, etc. You can also get a good proxy through direct traffic to your website. So how many people are coming to your website unprompted, using your company name to get there, and are those the right folks that you're looking for? Because obviously sometimes people are coming there for your career page, and other times they're coming for to actually buy your product or investigate your product. And so there's ways to sort of parse out those two different audiences. And then a third thing we look at is actually just social media follows and things like that. So as you're building your social media organic strategy, as you build your paid strategy, you're actually building your organic strategy, right? So if you're targeting people through a paid strategy to get them to your social feeds, then it's actually making your organic strategy more valuable, because then everything you post is being seen by the right eyeballs. So it's nice to do that in a combination. Although, you're low budget, you're going to start with organic. And so we track things like LinkedIn followers. Again, it's like that's where the B2B audience tends to be, even in the medical community in many cases. It depends on who your buyers are. But so, I mean, I think you could probably pick your platform and see what's right for you. And it's going to be different for probably every organization as to what the weighting of those metrics are and how you look at your composite. But those are three that I think are probably a good place to start. Have you guys done that before? Are you looking at brand metrics?
I love those. I think, everyone should take notes, right? Those are the ones to begin with. And I love those at any stage company, right? That brings you something to the boardroom that you can discuss and have data to back a perspective on brand investment. We're all in a life cycle where we know the needle is pushed to demand, and we recognize that, right? Like there is, at the end of the day, we are a business, we need to grow business. Yet, it is informed by brand. So there's I think there's going to be a pivot to maybe more of a equilibrium of brand and demand.
I agree.
Because it isn't like an end all be all. Demand only ignores things around growing influence or executive visibility or some other things that are meaningful with brand.
We also have really seen the numbers drop. When you reduce your brand spend, your demand conversions go down. Just we see it every time.
As a fact.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
It's data driven. But it's really hard to convince people when you're at the front end of setting up campaigns and brand feels more fluffy.
I mean, a really simple one is bid on your brand name in Google Ads. Ensure you are the number one for your brand name, right? That's a simple brand exercise. And you might find your competitors are bidding on your name, and they can do that. They just can't use your name in the ads. But owning that first place on Google is a worthwhile and modest brand investment if you're trying to figure out where to begin.
I actually love it when competitors do that. It's the first thing when in the past I've worked with clients, the first thing I show them is like, here's what happens when I Google your brand. And then like 8 competitors come up ahead of them. And it's like just such an aha moment for people.
Yeah.
Good news, they're bidding on you. Bad news is they're outbidding you.
Yeah. And people are potentially really are clicking on them first before getting to your name. So one metric I wanted to call out that we haven't mentioned, and it struck me because you all were talking about the importance of the relationship between finance and marketing. One of my finance leaders that I've worked with in the past was really pushing on NPS as a metric that we track and take to the board. And it just struck me that we haven't talked about that, but that's a key metric that at every org I work in, I'm like, what's the NPS? And if we're not tracking it, when can we start? Because it's a huge metric for marketing. To use that in the public, but it's also a great board metric to use. And, I think people really look at, and because it's an industry sort of standard metric versus like customer satisfaction or some other thing you could make up, I think NPS, there's flaws there, but it's like the one that you should really turn to, frankly.
That's a really good one.
But I think to that point, right? Like that's also signaling to you where you have strong accounts and where you don't. And where there are opportunities for improvement. I mean, we've looked at it from a very
NPS has been a tool for me in my past life where it's been a great source of the starting point for where do we need to be thinking about everything from product to, end user, the user experience to, the client relations experience, right? So like, that client satisfaction, customer success, whatever you want to call it, it's really critical to be looking at NPS from a lot of different angles, and absolutely, marketing can play a role there. I mean, that's a team sport in terms of what's driving those numbers, but absolutely it should be something that marketing is playing a critical role in looking at. I agree. I think we could go on for about another hour and a half. And I have a whole list of other questions but I think we should probably wrap. So this has been great. I think we've covered a lot of ground in terms of those key metrics, some of the things that we need to know around infrastructure and the beyond the critical few, which are also important. Any final takeaways, something that you learned today that you're like, what were you taking notes on, Julia, that you really want to make sure we get in our files?
Yeah, two thoughts. One is, like, great ideas come from everywhere, and I think each of us as CMOs have worked on building our network and getting sounding boards. So I loved hearing your perspectives, and would just encourage everyone else to do the same. My second key learning is my keyboard is too loud, so that's fine.
Hear that?
No silent keyboard. No. Any final takeaways?
We didn't talk about AI. I'm going to call that out.
We did not.
We did not talk about
AI. Call out one AI thing that I think would be helpful for this conversation going forward. And one of the questions we had wanted to ask was how could we use AI? And so I just want to shout out that using AI to research for brand marketing, sort of base numbers, you can like as a research tool on some of this. I think it can be super helpful. So I think it can support a lot of these different conversations, and that's my shout out on AI. So yeah. And that's my key takeaway too.
I have one AI comment that I'll make because I recently heard that OpenAI's business model was all about, we're going to build, a certain sophistication of AI through ChatGPT, and then we're going to ask AI how we should monetize this business and how we should grow our business. So I challenge all of you, before we come back for our next episode, to ask AI in whatever form you need to, what strategies should your current companies or clients use to grow their business? I'm very curious as to what you come back with.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, it's, you guys,
that's
an amazing
fantastic
research tool for that. That's awesome. I love that. All right.
I think I've shared this AI tidbit with you all before, but oftentimes when I'm trying to get some sort of just a calculation on CAC or anything else, I will use AI just to give me the formula. So I'll put in the end results and then I'll ask it, can you spit out a formula? It'll spit it out, and then I can easily use a subset of data to get it out. And so it's created some efficiencies in that aspect. But my key takeaway for this session is essentially around the latter part of the conversation that we were having around having both brand awareness programs and demand gen programs, and how those always should be on together because they help support each other. And although the brand awareness one doesn't necessarily have a quicker ROI that most of our stakeholders are looking for, where they're looking for those quick conversion metrics. So there's a longer bit of ROI, but there's data that shows that we need to have it always on, especially in healthcare because of how saturated and noisy this market is. So
good word.
That's my takeaway.
I think my key takeaway was just the reminder from Bethany around, yes, you want sales and marketing alignment, and that's not always going to happen, that your goals and objectives may not be perfectly aligned. And trying to get to that point and recognizing that you may be at different stages in terms of where the business is at. can, play a really important role in how you think about what you do, how you structure your interactions, and where you're focusing your time, effort, and attention. So
I'm going to throw one more key takeaway: having finance at the table. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think, again, I've never articulated that, but it's really true. It's a great insight, especially for this conversation. So,
for sure. Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm going to double down on Julia's comment about really interviewing the organization that you're joining as a marketing leader. Like, CMOs have the shortest tenure of any C-suite executive on average. And so I think it's really critical to like interview this company and make sure they're aligned, make sure you've got a CEO that gets you and trusts you and will buy into the fact that marketing is a valuable component in the organization. And that's what's going to drive business going forward and puts the right level of importance against that. But the same with, the sales executives, the finance executives, like you want to come into an organization that values the CMO and marketing's role in that space. So definitely keep your standards high when you're looking for a new company.
Bethany, I think that's a whole episode. The red flag.
I think that's a whole episode. That might be. We're gonna add that. Yeah, I'll type it later.
Ladies, it's great to be with you as always. This has been a treat, and let's do it again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of CMOs Off Script. This podcast was made possible by Breezy Hill Marketing. Don't forget to explore the podcast notes or CMOSOffscript.com for additional insights and resources. Until next time, be bold and stay curious.